Okay, Big G.
Awesome. James, how are you?
I'm great. It's been a while.
It has been a couple of years at least since we've spoken. Yeah, maybe one of the gatherings.
Gathering maybe 3 or 4 years ago. So.
Yep, agreed.
Yeah.
There hasn't been one for a couple of years now.
So I should introduce you, Gerald Burton-Batty, fondly known as Big G by, well, at least the Will Machado Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu community, and probably lots of other people.
Yes. Yep.
So we know each other obviously through Jiu-Jitsu. I started with John 21 years ago, and you were training for a long time before that, I think.
A few years. I think I've been with John, I'm going to guess 25 now. It might be 24, 25. So yeah, a couple of years ahead of you.
Yeah. Wow. So, I've got to admit that, I had a bunch of people that offered to come and chat on the podcast. But yeah, this is the first recording for Forged in Fire podcast, and I chose you for a couple of reasons. One, I've always found you really easy to have a chat to, so I've made my job a little bit easier, and and then also because I've always respected you, for not just your jiu-jitsu, but you're one of the people that when I started with John, we were training at different gyms, but you're always, super welcoming and, a very warm person. So, this follows on from lots of little chats we've had at various seminars and gatherings and things over the years. And yeah, thanks for coming on.
Awesome. Thanks, James. And what an introduction. I didn't know I was going to be number one. I had heard about your project, obviously, and was genuinely interested in it, and wanted to support you. That's a hell of an introduction. So thank you. I hope I deserve half of that. There's certainly been some crossovers in the years that we've known each other. Jiu-jitsu would be one. I think CrossFit.
Yeah.
I think some MMA crossovers, and certainly a lot of relationships, certainly a lot of mutual friends and sort of experiences. Had some interest in crypto for a while, and you were part of that early on. Mate, it's really nice to be here and really nice to chat to you. And I think you've got some exciting times ahead with Forged in Fire podcast. And I saw your expression of interest with regards to people who might have something to share or something to tell. And I thought, I think I might. I'm not really sure, is the honest truth. I guess we'll find out in the next little while. Mate, really honoured to be here and be part of what you're doing. I think it's going to be great.
Yeah, thanks, Gerald. You pretty much taken the words out of my mouth. I put out I put a comment on Facebook saying that I was looking to have some conversations with people that have maybe been through some tough times and come out the other side. And I absolutely blown away by the response from people, and I want to have these conversations because I know that there always are people that are going through some tough times and struggling, and often it's very difficult to see the other side, and I thought maybe by having some conversations with people who have see some light, and they've, maybe moved past, maybe not totally, but maybe through the worst parts of, of where they were at, that maybe, it gives a little bit of hope, and, might give some ideas and some suggestions, and, maybe some motivation or some inspiration to some people that are currently struggling. So, that's why we're here.
Yeah, good.
So, yeah, maybe you could sort of share a little bit about, why you thought it might be worth having a chat, what's been going on for you, and yeah.
Sure. So first of all, a couple of things. I certainly identified with the call out and thought, there's some tough times that you've been through, that I've been through, that certainly a lot of people that we know have been through, that kind of resonate, and some that we know about, some that we kind of probably remain hidden. And I think they're important to share, and I think your motivation to do that, to assist people and help people is certainly very worthy, and certainly going to work. That's been the case for me in some, certainly in times of my some of my darkest hours has been identifying with people who have been through tough situations, certainly not a lot tougher than I have, and come out the other side, and turned out to turn those experiences into positives. And so I've sort of tried to do the same at times, though that's often been difficult. But yeah, there's it's hard to know where to start in a way, in terms of a story, or where you kind of pick your sort of point of origin. But I feel like in life I've had a few kind of setbacks and a few challenges, as I said, more than some, not as much as others. And those seem to be kind of turn into sort of exciting stories, and most people don't kind of pick them, or don't seem to, they're not always obvious on the surface. But once you start to unpack some of the people that we know, and some of the people that you have on your podcast, there's certainly a lot of layers, and a lot of kind of a lot more to them than meets the eye. So that's possibly the case with me as well. And it's I suppose those examples have certainly carried me through. So there's people that you've mentioned, John Will, for example. He's a primary figure for me, in terms of, he's certainly been through some difficult times, and certainly holds himself up to the light to say he's not perfect, and but to sort of, for people to sort of, take him or leave him according to his imperfections, and that's certainly an example I strive to kind of live up to, in terms of saying, there's some things that I've done that I'm not too proud of, in a way, and there were motivations for those things that at the time seemed relevant, but now I can kind of look back on them and think, all right, they set me up to be a better human going forwards, and those are ultimately worthy examples. So like I said, it's hard to know where to start. My biggest turning point recently has been becoming a parent. Is probably one of the real strengths that I've found in life in the last few years, and it was a little bit unexpected, and certainly caused me to have to look in the mirror a lot harder than I have in a while, and that was a real catalyst to kind of making some changes, and some changes I probably wanted to make for a while. So I tend to think, and I'm going to guess in advance, I tend to think that might be something that you might find that is regular and typical of people, is that point in time, or that point in life where you realize there was another human being that's going to rely on you for a long time to come, to be sort of a provider and a nurturer and a father, and a figure of example. That was very motivating for me, and I'm very thankful for, actually.
It's I've got a similar example with, I already had 3 children when my
Wow.
youngest boy was born, but prior to Mac being born, I was in a pretty bad place as well. I'd struggled to manage the CrossFit gym to a degree that I'd probably bitten off more than I could chew. Really struggling, probably at the depths, the worst place I'd ever been, I think, mentally, and and just him, the actual the action of him being born just seemed to sort of give me a spark and, and turn me around. So I can certainly relate to, the fact that, that a child can be a real catalyst for making some changes. So, I'm guessing you had to make some pretty big changes, or you did make some pretty big changes with your
Jack was a real catalyst for me to, and by the way, I've just taken my headphones off because I'm pretty sure I've selected the right device settings to not need those anymore. But so I'm hoping the microphone still works okay.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's good.
So yeah, look, historically, I've been through a bit of a who's who of kind of drama queen issues, but yeah, the key ones for me, or the key one that I really addressed for becoming a parent, was a bit of a reliance on alcohol, which I certainly use as a bit of a drug of choice for a long period of time, or off and on for a long period of time, and something that I decided to give up just to be, more present for him, to make my time more valuable. I sort of started to realise that my time with him was every moment was a once in a lifetime opportunity, and I sort of started to try and treat every moment with him as that, and make it special, and make sure that I could look back on those moments with some pride. And I sort of feel like the journey with alcohol up to that point meant that I didn't always look back on my achievements and my experiences, my photo albums and those types of things, with the sense of pride that I felt that I could have if I'd sort of left alcohol out of it. So I'd certainly used it, or come to use it, as a bit of a drug, a bit of a crutch. I think I think in Australia, or in society generally, we kind of fall for the drugs and alcohol kind of mantra, and I tend to think that alcohol is a drug. It's just another drug of dependence, the same as methamphetamines or ice or marijuana or whatever your drug of choice is. And I've tried all of those things, by the way, and it certainly had some good and bad experiences with a lot of other drugs, but alcohol was one for me that I kind of used regularly, was tolerated by society and by the people around me. Many of my relationships revolved around, the mutual sort of love of alcohol. I worked in industries like, I still work in construction, and I worked in hospitality as a bouncer for years, and that is literally the alcohol industry, where, alcoholism was very much a rite of passage, and tolerated and encouraged. Typical Aussie bloke, style. I worked in fly in, fly out for years, probably 10 years in the mines again, where you'd work 13 days and you'd be written off for the other day. Your day off was spent kind of drinking and sobering up. And again, that was fine as far as, 90% of the site crew were concerned. And I kind of got to a point where, particularly with Jack for the last few years, I decided that, it's time to kind of put that on the shelf and leave it there. So I pretty much did exactly that. I've been sober for 9 months,
awesome.
And that's the longest I've been in many, many years. I think going back to the next longest period of time for me to be sober would be back fighting MMA, and that was back when I really took my health seriously. I really was conscious of how much that detracted from my physical performance. And that's a good 20 years now, really, since I was actively involved in that scene and fighting on shows and that type of thing. I think that's a long overdue wake up call, and I'm really glad to have made it. I don't miss it. I don't I feel like I probably may drink again in future if I feel like it, but certainly the regular kind of drinking and the drinking to excess, I think, is a thing that I'm going to happily put behind me, and use Jack for the motivation, not only to make that change but to maintain it.
So how did you do that, Gerald? Obviously you made the decision that that it's something you needed to do. Was it something that you were able to just do by yourself, or?
That's a really, really tough question. I've been trying to do it for a while. Like, I'd sort of had various goes at it myself for my own motivations over the years. And at times I've been successful in days, weeks, months of sobriety, and kind of for various reasons I'd set myself little goals and achieve them, and sometimes I wouldn't. But they weren't really I wasn't very committed to them. So it was a bit of I did use the kind of New Year's Eve resolution as a bit of a starting point. So it was New Year's Eve last year that it was the last time I had a beer.
So, and I managed to kind of think, okay, I was spending a bit of time with family over in the West at the time, and I was away from my son, and I was, again, a kind of bit of a pause for reflection, being, I tend to find traveling's been a bit of a tool for me in terms of getting away from my comfort zones and looking back at myself. And whether that's traveling just, locally, interstate, internationally, that's been the case. So this little trip back to Perth, I got locked down because of COVID with the family over there. Had a few beers on New Year's Eve with my brother-in-law, and pretty much decided, I'm going to kind of see how far I can go. And the first sort of few weeks were, as some of the previous few weeks have been, with trying to sort of, jump off the beers, difficult. Difficult to break the regular habit. Difficult to drive past Dan Murphy's and wonder what might be in store. And that's an interesting. We've got time for a few stories, I'm sure. But I remember having a chat with a friend of mine who, struggles with methamphetamine addiction. And we're talking about kind of our mutual vices. And I was saying it's actually more difficult to be, I'll use the word alcoholic. It's more difficult because you're driving past, dealers. You're driving past alcohol dealers every day. There's 3 or 4 of them on your way home, and that's all okay. You don't have to kind of meet dodgy blokes in McDonald's car parks and do kind of handshake deals to kind of pick up your latest score. It's right there in front of you. You can drive. You can do it from the comfort of your car. And, swipe as you go through and barely break stride on your way home and kind of, fuel up for the weekend. So, so that was the motivation. That was the sort of the pivot point for me. And I just thought, I've just got to keep off it. And the first month or two was a little difficult. And then it actually got a lot easier. The more time passed, the easier it got. I struggled with lockdown last year. I found that being locked down last year with COVID was a catalyst for me for drinking, and I've managed to make sure that isn't the case this year because here we are again locked down. So far so good. I deliberately left alcohol in the house so that it wasn't a matter of not having it available. I made sure that it was available and I wasn't sort of just testing myself that way. I thought, okay, that was something I chose to do to kind of prove that that I had the willpower to do it. That was basically how it worked. That was the pivot, and like I said, so far so good.
It's interesting. It's an interesting strategy because you hear so many people say, "I can't have alcohol in the house." It's interesting that that it's part of your strategy is to actually have the alcohol in the house. So I
wanted to do that, and I have been that person, by the way, where if I have alcohol in the house, particularly if I started drinking, if I was going to have a big Friday or a big Saturday, if there was something in the house, I'd go through it. So
and I think alcohol is one of those things, isn't it, where you kid yourself, I'm just going to have a glass of wine with dinner, or I'm just going to have a beer after work, and before you know it, you've had a skinful again, and I just before we got on the podcast, I said to you, I sort of wonder whether like with MMA athletes in particular, or people that do participate in sports that maybe generate a lot of adrenaline, a lot of excitement, maybe maybe more prone to alcohol and or drugs, maybe looking for some sort of a rush. Do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, I do, absolutely. I think, look, I've come across a lot of people in MMA, and more so in MMA than jiu-jitsu, that are, tend to be abusers, substance abusers, whether it's alcohol or drugs. And so I tend to think there is that thrill-seeking mentality that goes with some of that addiction. I also think addiction is one of the key words there. I think we're addictive personalities. I think people who are going to go as far as you need to go to certainly to succeed in MMA these days are probably have some kind of obsessive personality or some kind of addictive personality. It's often a trait of people who are very successful, but also can be a trait of a double-edged sword in terms of, also leading them to, not know when to stop. And that was an issue for me. I had trouble stopping, whether it was alcohol, drugs, sport, relationships, jobs. I've tended to be an addictive personality and recognize that as something that I have had to come to terms with over the years and recognise as something that's worked for me at times and also worked against me as well, and when I haven't been able to kind of control it or regulate it. So yeah, I think MMA is it's a thrill-seeking sport. You've got to be relatively extroverted, dynamic in terms of your personality. So yeah, I think there's definitely some parallels there and some connections.
Yeah, I was interested in talking about it because that's my observation, is that a lot of guys who have been fighters of all sorts, MMA, kickboxing, striking arts in particular, that anything where where there's a high risk of being hit, that sort of adrenaline, there seems to be a high proportion in my experience of people who end up using drugs and using alcohol, quite heavily. But then the flip side of that is I also know a lot of people who use jiu-jitsu as something, to do instead of doing drugs and drinking.
Yeah, that's right. That's an escape as well, and I'd make the point before we kind of go down that rabbit hole of saying that also the discipline that's required for mixed martial arts, or that can be required for people to succeed, depending on where they kind of find themselves in the athletic spectrum, is also almost like a polar opposite of that kind of craziness.
Yeah.
So there's actually there's a mindset in the community within, or subset of the community that we exist in, that are also highly disciplined and highly regulated and have a very, very high degree of self-control. And that is again something that can really work for them in that environment, and potentially at times also work against them. So in life, I mean. So yeah, certainly not to suggest that I think that everybody in MMA is crazy and addicted to drugs and alcohol. No. Absolutely not. That's one of the best parts of the sport, whether it's jiu-jitsu or MMA, that there are subsets of the communities, that are almost kind of very, very diverse, and in some cases very extreme and quite crazy and addictive, and in others, very, very highly disciplined and very calm. So
yeah.
So yeah, I hope that kind of rounds out that part of the conversation. It is interesting to come across those people and work out where they fit on those spectrums.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things that I sort of use, I've got a picture of a mask up behind me, and I talk about the fact that we often wear different masks for different different circumstances, and it's quite often it might be 10 or 15 years before you know somebody well enough to actually discover or for them to for you to have the sort of level of friendship where they will discuss or disclose the things that they are struggling with, whether it be alcohol, drugs, depression, anxiety.
That's right. That's right.
Whatever it might be. And some of the people that have contacted me, I would have to say, I won't say I'm surprised, because I've got an awareness of the fact that this is an issue, and obviously that's why I'm doing this. But you never know who.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people, but you never know who, and and sometimes it can be close family members and and close friends that you have no idea. So
absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I've obviously got a lot of messages from people, supporting doing this, and I, in nearly every instance, had no idea.
Yes.
So,
yeah. Well.
Yeah.
It is very interesting to say that the mask is a real facade for us, and it's for our generation, we're both kind of 50 odd. That was the mask was something that you wore day to day and kind of got you through your encounters with people. I think there's another level of that mask these days with the online facade that occurs with our media presence, like our social media presence, and who we portray ourselves to be on social media. And that's another kind of layer to that mask that you kind of have to get through before you get to the one where you meet people in person. There's so much of our interactions these days are online, as this one is right now. So I think there's almost like more and more layers to the masks occurring, and you know, whether people realize that or not is certainly part of their kind of, you know, self-management and you know, their self-image. You mentioned depression and anxiety in as part of the conversation. Certainly something I've had a very, very, you know, strong association with depression over the years, and really struggled with that, and something that would be a surprise to some. You know, the people in my inner circle would be like, yeah, okay, you know, oh, he's going to talk about that. Yeah, okay, you know, about time. There'd be others that be like, wow, really? You know, I had no idea. I remember I lost a parent to suicide in the early 90s. You know, I was 20 years old when mum went, and that was kind of something that I didn't really, depression wasn't a word that I really used or understood, and it wasn't until I did some brief military service in reserves and looked at going into the permanent forces, and as part of the selection process, they identified that as part of the psychological assessments and talked to me about depression and mental health issues, and it was a new language to me completely. You know, I really didn't understand what was happening or what that sort of meant or how far it was going to go, and have been medicated, you know, at various times, and almost, you know, the truth is almost institutionalized for some of the episodes that have occurred, you know, with mental health and depression. And you know, you well know the story of losing part of my left ear, and sort of how traumatic that was coming up to 20 years ago. And again, that was a very dark period for me in terms of the demons that occurred for me with depression, and required a sort of a lot of medication, a lot of help. And again, they were sort of, I can never get past the year. That's something that people kind of, that's a part of my mask that I can't change. And interesting for me, it meant that I couldn't hide as much as I used to, because I could kind of have this alter ego at work where I was sort of wear a shirt and tie and kind of polish up pretty well and get away with, you know, not having to be associated with some of the darker things that had happened for me. And you know, losing that part of my facade or part of my mask with the ear was a really big one for me. It was like, okay, now I have to acknowledge that every time I look in the mirror, and you know, and deal with the questions and the kind of scrutiny and the assessments and the kind of almost the judgment that comes with that. So that was a real kind of, again, a bit of a pivot point for me, and I struggled with that for a long time. I really did. It really took me a while to come to terms with that and what it meant, and you know, how it defined me. So the mask is a key element to understanding ourselves and our motivations.
And I think, you know, we were like, particularly our generation, and I'm a couple of years older here. I'm 57, so I'm, you know, I'm closer to 60 than 50.
Wow. Didn't know that, Jay. You should have gone with 50 odd. You were
But I think we were pretty much taught to wear a mask. Like, you know,
that's also true.
Yeah, like it was just get on with it.
Do you think
was basically the attitude? You know, and
I think we are.
Yeah.
I think we're better at acknowledging it and trying to challenge it, but I still think we're encouraged to do it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and you know, I was born in the UK, and you know, the British, you know, sort of stiff upper lip attitude, you know, basically, you know, grin and bear it was the, you know, it was the catch cry, really, you know. I think we need to normalise the fact that people do go through a range of emotions, and that, you know, the more people, I personally, I think one of the biggest problems with depression is the fact that we hide it. You know, we do keep it behind the mask, and you know, we need to encourage people to talk rather than to try and grin and bear it, because, you know, as we well know, and you know, you mentioned that, you know, you lost a family member to suicide, and you know, I've lost friends to suicide and colleagues to suicide.
Absolutely.
They never said anything to anybody.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, and then they're gone. You know, and you know, the more we can encourage, you know, the fact that guys like you and I can admit to, you know, having periods of depression and struggling with depression, and you know, and being medicated, and you know,
for sure.
then the more other people maybe will, be prepared to, to step forward. And even if it's just to go to their, I think a lot of guys won't even tell their doctor they're depressed, and I'd go so far as to say they probably often, people that are lucky enough to have had a lifetime GP or a GP that they've had a relationship with for 20 years or so, they'll go and get their prostate checked, but they won't tell the doctor that they're struggling from depression,
What an interesting question, which is more invasive,
uncomfortable.
I've had my prostate checked. Yeah, we're going up to that. Yeah, I was thinking, have I? Yeah, I have.
Yeah.
It was a few years ago. I'm probably just about due. I'm about to go 50, so I'll be 50, this time next year.
Yeah.
Just over a year from now, and you start going through a few more of the old man checks or the middle-aged life crisis checks. But I haven't spoken to a GP about depression in, I reckon, 10 years, and I guess for me that's because I feel like I've been in charge of it for about that long. It's been about that long since it was a real problem for me. But that's not to say that couldn't change. So why don't I talk to my GP about it? You're right. I do wear the mask. I do pretend. I do. There's dark periods we go through. I went through a pretty tough couple of years ago, and I was thinking about suicide all the time. But I would never have told anyone that, or I would never have, I might have shared it with my sister, who's probably my closest kind of confidant in life, and said, hey, or she would have been less about me sharing, more about her picking up on some language and saying, hey, how are you really going? And she's probably the only person that really has that "are you okay" chat with me that really matters.
Yeah.
But otherwise, you're only a few bad days or an event or two away from potentially becoming a statistic. Yourself. And we're surrounded by those guys. We're surrounded by guys with facing those same challenges, and we still struggle to talk about suicide and say the word, in a sentence and have that be okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'm now eternally grateful that I knew I was going through a really bad patch, and actually, took myself to the doctor and said, I need help, a few years ago. And
brilliant.
Yeah, but there are, and it was just, I realized out of the blue that I was having, suicidal thoughts, What if I just did this, What if I just did that? And I can understand how how quickly somebody can just be gone. It's So we've got to keep on talking about it.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
Linking
through those things together, I again, like I said, about 10 years ago was a tough time for me, and the last time I really had some major life struggles that I can sort of put down to a particular period of time. But I think the alcohol for me really masked the kind of was my escape, and almost like there was some massive risk-taking behavior and stuff that occurred during those times. I remember for sort of every weekend for weeks and months at times, kind of waking up on a Saturday morning or sometime during a Saturday and thinking, wow, like I'm alive. I'm almost kind of checking myself till I think, yep, okay, where am I? Am I injured? Am I, have I got my wallet? Have I got my phone? Like, kind of, how the fuck did I get home? Having some sort of massive black spots and blank spots to fill in, and thinking, looking back on that now, thinking, why was I doing that? Why was I blanking out significant periods of time regularly to effectively being a high functioning alcoholic, maintaining a job, and kind of, but living for the weekends and living for kind of, those excessive times. What was I hiding? What was I running from? And it's kind of building up the layers of that mask and having to find, for me, sometimes it's been some major geographic changes. If I tied some of I've moved interstate, punctuated some interstate sort of locations pretty regularly between Western Australia and Melbourne, and if the truth be told, some of those changes have come about because I've realised that I'm almost there's some self-preservation that kicks in, and I think if go somewhere else, if I continue to maintain the habits and with all due respect to some of the friends I've got, some of the relationships I had, then I'm probably going to end up in a box. So coming back to Melbourne a couple of times, including the last time in 2014, was a bit of a survival, action.
Yeah. So, one of the things that I sometimes have to remind myself too is that, sometimes the things that I've seen as failures at different times. So, for example, you mentioned that we both had an involvement with CrossFit. So,
Yes.
I saw, I went through a period of time where I saw what was going on with CrossFit Ballina under my management as a failure. But, looking back at it now, I opened a bloody CrossFit gym, I opened a CrossFit box, and
you had to go.
changed lots of people's lives, or had an input into changing people's lives, gave them the opportunity to change their own lives.
Yep.
But for whatever reason, things weren't going 100% to plan, and I saw it as a failure at the time, but it's really, what really happened was, was I, didn't make the money that I thought I was going to make, and it wasn't ticking along,
Yep.
making the small fortune that I thought I was going to make operating the CrossFit box. I think we put some, we put some strange meanings to things at times, and maybe spend way too much time thinking what if,
For sure.
rather than what now. We think what if.
I've wasted years of my life thinking what if. That's the absolute truth.
Me too. And it's funny. Like I can look back at now and laughing about having a chat with you, and think I don't really have any regrets. Like I don't believe in regrets. I don't believe in regrets. But in saying that, there's plenty of things if I had the chance to do them again, I'd probably do them differently. And
that's the absolute truth. And if I grabbed a meaning or a message out of, I guess, spending some time talking to you tonight, and what this might sort of mean for others, there's a couple of things you just mentioned. So the first one is opening a CrossFit box is awesome. You've created a sanctuary and a haven and a place for people to come and train and work through their demons at your place and put their lives on hold for an hour while they come in. And I think that's what a lot of people are doing, whether it's CrossFit or jiu-jitsu or MMA. They're coming to a gym. It's an escape. It's as much about the physical escape as it is mentally and emotionally. So there's a good chance that some of the people who walk through your doors and that you would still, have on your phone list and your contact list and still call friends, found genuine meaning and sort of genuine ability to change their own situations through what you provided at your gym. And that was the same experience for me, is that was opening my own gym. And fast forward, CrossFit for me was also a failure, if you care to kind of, put the business kind of metrics up on the wall and look at how much money I put in versus how much it profited. I think we maybe had 1 or 2 profitable months in the whole time it was open. So a huge investment of time and energy and emotion and money for outcomes that really, were sort of felt like failures at the time. And I spent a lot of time crying into beer and whatever else I could find to kind of get over that. But for many other people, I've still got people that talk about what a great experience that was, what a great gym that was, how they never realized how great that gym was until they left and went somewhere else, and then kind of, were frustrated to find that I'd gone out of business when they tried to come back. And I'm sure people say the same thing about CrossFit Ballina. So there's that. And I guess as a clear message, what we've just discussed in terms of having no regrets, but kind of being the age we are and having the realizations that you've got is, for others who might be on the call that are a bit younger than us or listening to this, start now. Like don't don't kind of get to, for me at 48 and for you at, mid 50s to kind of be having some of those realizations. You can have those realizations earlier and make some changes.
Yep.
And, not necessarily have to go through the same sacrifices that we might have made to get to this point. So I wish I had Jack a lot earlier. Like I said, he's been a real pivot for me that I can't, put on hold, or I can't procrastinate about. He's there, and he's right there, and he's not taking no for an answer. And, so I've got to be present. I've got to be there. I've got to kind of, be the man I need to be to be his father. It would be, I kind of feel like, if we talk about I wish, and what if, I wish that had happened for me earlier, and I might have taken some of the opportunities to be a dad earlier, and what if I'd been a dad in my 20s or 30s, and those opportunities kind of came up and passed for various reasons. So, I kind of look back and think, what kind of man would I be if I'd had that motivation and real inspiration and commitment earlier, and not been so selfish in a way, and having no one to really care about but me.
Yeah.
I could be selfish. I could waste that time. I could waste, I could be that addictive kind of person and kind of burn all of that opportunity. And I'm a little bit frustrated with myself that I have gotten here, but I'm also looking at the remainder of my career and the remainder of my life and thinking I've still got a load of time to learn from those inverted comma mistakes and build on those experiences. And I've still got some amazing relationships to nurture and to kind of enjoy. So particularly the one with my son. So as you say, no regrets. Just a matter of kind of turning those turbulent years into some probably turbulent years going forward. So there'll be some ups and downs, but ideally more productive and positive. And as I said, I feel like I'm going to have a greater sense of pride in what I'm going to do compared to some of the things I've done.
Well, maybe I'll probably misquote our coach, John Will. I believe I heard him say, where you are right now is where you need to be. And I knowing John, he probably said it in the context of both BJJ and life in general.
Yes.
But yeah, it's something that he said that I might not have used the exact words, but it's sort of I really get that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Isn't he an amazing human being? I remember from my very earliest experiences of John that I liked it more when he'd stop teaching jiu-jitsu and start talking about life than when he taught jiu-jitsu. And I loved him talking about jiu-jitsu. Like for the, those times, I still have actually somewhere not very far away. I can usually reach for it because it's one of my most precious things. I have a diary of all of my original kind of lessons with John, like in the late 90s. I used to come home and write for as long as probably longer. I would write a diary than I had spent on the mat, and I think that got me a lot of progression early in terms of my jiu-jitsu, but also in life, because a lot of what John spoke about from his experiences, and he's a generation ahead of us. Well, kind of. He's he's really got some great stories to tell, and I think you've got some great stories to tell, and I feel like I might have, and there's probably people that were at CrossFit Melbourne and fast forward CrossFit that liked it when we stopped talking about barbells and started kind of talking about a bit of life as well. So it's good to reflect like that. I think those positive role models are key factors in our success, whatever we choose that to be.
Yeah, I think I'm glad that I was old enough when I started at Geelong. So I think I started in early 2000 training with John, and so I was already 35, 36, and I was old enough to appreciate what he was. And I think, I hope everybody at Red Cat Academy, as it's now called, I hope they realise the the quality of the coach that they have. You know, that in a lot of cases they've got just by virtue of the fact that that's the door that they walk through.
Yeah. Yeah, we definitely got lucky. There's some amazing jiu-jitsu coaches in Australia, but I think we got an amazing life coach as well.
Yeah, very, very lucky. And, you know, and all the people that, you know, that we probably met as a result of being in that circle and being in a circle that you know, that you wanted to stay in. You know, I mean, I tried lots of things before I went and trained there. You know, I dipped my toe in the water with, you know, with a few different martial arts, and it never stuck in anything. And you know, walked into John's gym, you know, in 2000, and you know, here we are in 2021, still doing jiu-jitsu. And you know, and hopefully for many more years. Gerald, I don't know how long we've been talking for. Probably nearly 45 minutes. I really appreciate you coming on this podcast. Just in wrapping up, do you have any sort of advice for people? Any sort of strategies, or any sage advice on people that are a little bit stuck at the moment? Anything in particular?
Great question. I probably should have thought about the answer and a lot more before I jumped on and shot from the hip. I don't really have any kind of meaningful quotes or I'm a bit of a lover of poetry. I'm a bit of a lover of kind of music and song, and there's plenty of kind of lyrics or quotes or poems that I could recite that I think would be a little bit meaningful. But I just think for people who want something a little different or a little more than what they've got, you've just got to go get it. You've just got to kind of and not in the kind of cheesy just do it cliche, the Nike cliche, but you've really just got to find something meaningful for you to make the change. And like I said, for me, it's Jack. It's my little man. He's caused me to become, to really face up to a few issues and address some things for me. I've started with some substance abuse and addiction issues and sorted those out. I've been working on some health issues. I'm working on some finance issues, which most of the people on my Facebook are probably sick of hearing about. But yeah, I think it's just a matter of deciding when you're really going to pivot and having a go, surrounding yourself with people that can assist you with those changes, maybe keeping those people that have been a little bit toxic for you at a distance for a while until you've kind of gotten yourself to a point where you can manage those people in your life. And just continue walking forward, continue walking towards those goals. So what else can we do?
Awesome. Gerald, thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure to be on the
I really appreciate it. Let's not leave it another 3 or 4 years before we have a chat. Hopefully the borders open and I can come back over to Victoria and we can catch up for a roll.
Sounds good, mate. Look forward to it.
Cheers. See you, Big D. Cheers, man. Thank you.